Prime Minister quote that Indian pharma industry is an asset not just for India but for the entire world. These are pride moment for all of us. And surprising is that rare disease was not known till 1990. It was considered as a genetic disorder. So a lot of information, exhaustive information and vivid information has been provided by Professor Ramaiah. And there is one lapse which we have noticed that ICMR defines rare disease in a different manner and CDSO defines in a different manner. So my humble submission to Dr. Somani, kindly take up, because both the babies are of Ministry of Health. Now there are 2-3 gentlemen. Dr. Vidishi is there. She is a patient as well as a doctor. She wants to serve this organization. Professor Ramaiah can directly get in touch. One Mr. Krishnan is there. Shimona is there. They have the questions which will be allowed at the end to ask. And finally, we switch over to, I have a submission that we should write to Department of Pharma like PL scheme for API to replace the Chinese substitution is there. Similar scheme can be recommended by all the association if agreed for the rare disease development also. Now, I switch over to next speaker, who is none other than Mr. Sudershan Jain. Dear Sudershan Jain is a think tank of our industry. He is Secretary General of IPA, Indian Pharmaceutical Alliance. He is a senior advisor to Apex Private Equity Firm and a visiting faculty of IIM Ahmedabad. Mr. Sudershan Jain retired as Managing Director of Abbott Healthcare in India prior to current assignment. As per his profile, his passion is healthcare and education. But I would like to add that his liking is to help the people with a smile. IPA total scenario has changed in the eyes of the government as well as in the eyes of the industry also after Mr. Sudershan Jain has joined. So this prestigious organization, over to Mr. Sudershan Jain.
Thank you very much, Sikri Saab, and pranam to all of you who are attending this seminar. Let me start by saying that this would not have been possible but for Sikri ji being here, which got all the association together. And thank you, Sikri ji, for very kind words. Thank you, Dr. Somani, for the keynote lecture, which all of us will be listening, and he is there. And also Professor Ramaiah for a very, very comprehensive lecture and keynote address. We have got great advantage of all association being there, and it is because of Sikri ji, Mahesh Doshi is there, KG Anand Krishnan, Mr. Reddy, Dr. Viranchi, Venkat, Jasti, and Mr. Reddy. Everyone is there. So it has been a great pleasure. And we have got great advantage of some of us senior colleagues being there, Deepnathji Chaudhary, and my friend Lanka Srinivas, and all the senior people whom I can see here. I, being a marketing person, I will start from customer journey and patient journey. I was just reading Economist special issue, Suffering in Silence, which talks on rare disease. And when I started looking at it, some of the greatest names in health in the global industry, Satya Nadella, son, it is already in public domain, he's suffering from rare disease. Ajit Jain, who say he's suffering from rare disease. And many of the friends whom family is afflicted with rare disease. And when you start looking at it, when you get affected with rare disease, there are 3 words which come to your mind. You suffer first from clinical shock. You don't know how to get it diagnosed. You suffer from psychological shock. And you say, why me and my family got afflicted? And the third, you suffer from economic shock because the cost of the payment is very high. And Ramaiah, Professor Ramaiah, when he was describing cost of life, it was very touching for me because a person's rare disease has got as much right to live compared to any other person. And thank you, Professor Ramaiah, to get those facts to everyone inside that every person has got the right to live.
Thank
now,
you
if I
very
look
much.
at the patient journey of person who gets afflicted with rare disease, first, there is a problem of diagnosis. The same person goes to multiple areas. There is problem of treatment because the medicines are not easily available. Professor Dr. Somaiah has made fundamental change as far as regulatory system is concerned. He is making maximum changes, and I've been part of rare disease industry with no knowledge. And when I keep on hearing the kind of changes which Dr. Somani is getting, salute to him and salute to CDSCO under his leadership, where he's trying to make the whole process much simpler. It is not only on patient basis you can import, now the regulatory system is also getting simpler. So there's a issue of treatment. Even if the issue of treatment is there, then there's the financial cost of treatment. Where does the patient get the money? And how do we tackle that issue? Different state governments have different processes. Tender size is very small. And it is a very, very cumbersome process. Patient assistance program. Again, that is an issue. And finally, the compliance system. COVID has exposed that issue. We have heard in the newspaper report, West epilepsy syndrome, the patient suffers, he can't get the treatment in Hyderabad, he can't get treated because of the COVID, he can't go to the hospital. So all those issues are very real issues which are being faced by the patient as far as rare disease is concerned. And sometimes it becomes so much burdensome for family, and hence the diagnosis rate in India is very, very high. I was going through the national rare disease policy, and I will quote some of the examples from there and come back to some specific recommendation given the very short period of time. First is we need to create a corpus fund. Yes, government expenditure should go up on rare disease, but we need to create a corpus fund. And I was talking to Sikri ji, thanks for his idea today morning when I was in discussion. CSR funding should be allowed for rare disease. Very, very important. Sikri ji, I took that point from you. But it is, I was talking of corpus fund because treatment cost is the major issue. So we need to create a corpus fund, and there must be an association with managers. Second, we need to create a patient registry because that will be a great use as far as, and it can be done by ICMR, and that recommendation should go in full swing at this particular moment. Third is rare disease cell definitely has to be created in the Ministry of Healthcare, Health and Family Welfare. Although we have been talking it for long, but there is a need, which is a nodal agency which gets the whole thing going forward as far as the whole area is concerned. We need to create a center for excellence for rare disease, at least 4 centers of excellence all over the country to begin with. We have got Center for Excellence in Bangalore, but there is a need for creating more Center for Excellence, which maintains the directive, which maintains the listing as far as the whole thing is concerned. We should accredit these Center for Excellence. The awareness at doctor's level, diagnosis, treatment is relatively low. That's why the patient keeps on moving from one place to another. We need to include the courses for rare disease in our medical education program. There is not much which has been done. It is an important issue. We have to get the salience of that issue as far as that whole area is concerned. And the last point is very, very important. We need to do epidemiological studies in this country. There are communities which are suffering from rare disease. If we can find out answers and create preemptive measures, that will be important. Last point, I will talk about the drugs, orphan drugs, as the point which you have said. India is the pharmacy of the world. India is a asset to the world. We need to work on development of these drugs in India, which will help to reduce the cost. And I'm sure a CDSCO will be very, very helpful, and the Indian industry needs to take charge. This is the area which is a rich area where Indian industry can make difference and can show the world that India can make difference. And India is not only the pharmacy of the world, it is developing and discovery place for the world. And it is an important area, and all of us are committed. Thank you, Sikri Saab, for bringing that.
Gagar mein Sagar. See, Sudershan Jain ji is known for the presentation. In his deliberation, few words have really touched me. Sentimental shock is there to the patient. Economic shock is there. सोशल स्टिग्मा इज देयर. व्यक्ति के अंदर, रोगी के अंदर एक हीन भावना उत्पन्न होती है, एंड डायग्नोस्टिक इज अ प्रॉब्लम, एंड ट्रीटमेंट इज नॉट easily available and is very expensive. If we are really a good human being, all of us have to do the analytical analysis among ourselves. What is our duty? And today morning I had a very detailed talk with, not only with Sudershan Jainji, I had a very detailed talk with Dr. B.D. Somani also last night. And he says, Sikri Sahab, I am not only a drug controller general of India, I am also a human being. His heart also throws for such type of patient. And I think when we have a regulator of that stature, changes will come. Because when Professor Ramaiah was speaking, one sentence he spoke was that a child who is having the rare disease is not able to see his 5th birthday. how a painful situation is. So it is the duty of all of us to think about that. And CSR was in my mind for quite some time. I will make a submission to all the association head. Luckily, all the presidents are there, chairmen are there, that jointly we should write to the government that any developmental activity, any molecule development, any technology work done on for this type of rare disease, it should be exempted from income tax, or it should be CSR funding. Now I come to next, a very highly qualified technocrat is none other than Mr. Venkat Jasti, who is a postgraduate in pharmacy from Andhra University, Visakhapatnam, and also a postgraduate in pharmacy from St. John University, New York, specializing in industrial pharmacy. He returned from USA in India 1989 when I met him first time in Mr. C.C. Reddy's room, sole pharma chairman. Since then, I know Mr. Jasti. He has been successfully managing the company Suven Pharma as a chairman and CEO, providing the right direction and leadership in developing new innovative business models. The company has 13 internationally discovered therapeutic drug candidates currently in preclinical stage of development, targeting conditions such as ADHD, dementia, depression, Parkinson disease, and
Thank you, Sikri, and thanks everyone for tuning in. Can you hear us? Rare disease in India includes the hemophilia, thalassemia, sickle cell anemia, Pompe disease, and cystic fibrosis, which are prevalent. But those people, the families faces challenges in their daily lives. They are vulnerable. They are neglected population. Like now we know how a COVID patient is isolated, and they're ashamed also for some reason or other. But you see how these rare disease people are isolated and discriminated forever, and which is not known to many people, and it is very challenging. And 7% of the global population goes through this rare diseases one way or other. So, what is the need of the hour? I mean, nothing. Everybody is talking about it. The government of India, they said 4 years ago some kind of a policy, as Sikri Sahab said, there's nothing coming out of it. So, what is it that is needed? I think the need is something from our side, industry side, as an individual. We have to bring the awareness to the people in the bureaucracy, in the political circles, to take care of this, because now people are listening something like a pandemic. Now everybody's after this pharmaceutical thing, and they want to give fast approvals and money. Like USA, they are giving money. See, the problem in India is value for life, as Dr. Ramaiah is saying, the economic value and all that stuff. But in India, many people don't care about the value for life. That is the main problem. Moreover, this diagnosis also, it takes 7 years before they can find out in India. It's a long duration. So what is the need of the hour is the genetic testing is needed for a prevention sake, and then genetic counseling is needed for the prevention sake. And also what we need is mainly the newborn genetic screening. And with gene therapy that is coming into the place, that also we need to play a role. People who are in the drug discovery like us, yes, we know, even though it's a small issue, small number of people, the clinical trials is a challenge. The time it takes to make a drug is a challenge. It takes more than 3 years. As Dr. Ramaiah showed the chart, that they are being given exclusivity of 7 years or 10 years in other countries when they develop a drug. And also they give a funding of 25% to 50% of the cost of the clinical trial, which is the main cost. These kinds of things are very much needed. As my friend Jain said, corpus fund, whatever the name you can call it, you need to have a budget for the CSIR budget or whatever it may be, and it has to be funded exclusively for these kinds of drugs that are there. So, and also we need to go through this much more diligently, and through this rare disease day or other forms, we need to bring the awareness of this drug, this disease, and also we need to bring the awareness mainly to the bureaucracy and the politicians. Otherwise, there will not be any way forward. The government also should help us to get the because cost of the drugs, even if it is available, are too humongous. So it should be free supply, and also some health insurance is needed for this purpose. And these are some of the things we can do. But awareness and also the policy is the name of the game. And as Sikri was saying, all these associations should go to the government. Now they will listen because of the pandemic situation. The same thing is happening to the rare disease population, and we should impress on them so that they can do something about it, especially when Nadda is still there through his good offices. The same thing that has been said about 4 years ago should be put into place. With this, I thank you, and thanks, everyone.
Excellent, Jasti Saab. I think you are the one who has really maintained the time management. You have given 1 minute to your next successor also. So we have to bring changes in the system. We have to bring changes in the political system, bureaucratic system, regulatory system, and change is the spice of life. And government has to come forward by way of free treatment, free medicine, free diagnostic, and to make the changes. And what Mr. Jasti has said, government is in a helping mode now. And now iron is hot and we all have to hit it. Thank you, Jasti Saab. Next is Dr. Viranchi Shah. Dr. Viranchi Shah is a pharmacist and entrepreneur. He has worked in the industry and has been associated with a number of associations. He loves gold. Unko sone se pyar hai. He loves gold too much. He is a gold medalist, having awarded Bansilal Hargobind Das gold medal. He is also awarded B.B. Patel gold medal from Gujarat University. In addition, he is an award holder of IDMA GP Nair Award, and he was awarded Pharma Ratan Upadhi also. He loves to write. He has written many articles in national as well as international journals. He is the promoter of Saga Life Science Limited and Saga Healthcare Limited, Private Limited. He holds Senior Vice-President position in IDMA, Secretary in FOPE, and is serving Gujarat Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and informally he is ready to help any person, any industry, any association. His command on English will be proven when he speaks today with eloquency and fluency. धारा वहां बहती है उनकी भाषा के अंदर. Over to lovable Viranchi bhai.
Thank you, Dr. Sikri, for your very kind words. First of all, I would like to congratulate Professor Ramaiah for raking up an issue which itself is very rare and bringing pharma industry into it. So I would specially commend Dr. Somani for showing interest as the DCGI, and also I would commend Sikri ji for bringing the entire pharma industry to focus on rare diseases. From the elaborate presentation that Professor Ramaiah made, it looks like diseases may be rare, but the issues are not scarce. There are abundant issues in handling various facets of rare diseases. And I was very closely watching his presentation, and he elaborated the opportunities that the Indian pharmaceutical industry can take and play a much important role in the rare disease management. And I would also like to draw that there are a lot of SMEs in India who have limited manufacturing capabilities. And therefore, when we speak of rare diseases and when we say that these diseases require medicines in very small quantities, though they are of very high value, I believe that the small and medium companies have infrastructure that suits manufacturing of small volume medicines with much more ease, and the systems are much more evolved to handle small volumes. So probably the Indian industry is in a better position to capture opportunities in the rare disease management. In fact, you might be knowing that the world's most expensive drug, Zolgensma, which is a Novartis drug to treat the spinal muscular atrophy, it costs about $2.15 million for one treatment, is actually a rare disease drug. It can just give you an idea of what kind of opportunities as pharmaceutical industries we can have, especially when you are handling smaller plants which can cater to smaller volumes.
Viranchi, some with you.
Hello. Since the DCGI, Dr. Somani is here, I would like to point out a couple of points that probably he could play some role in. Sir, we do not so far as I understand, we do not have a specific fast track system to handle the approval of the orphan drugs or the drugs that handle the rare diseases. So if we can come out with a policy that could give fast track approval for certain drugs, it could be helpful to the Indian industry. Another point that has not been discussed by any of my previous speaker is that the Office of DCGI approves clinical trials of the drugs, especially including the orphan drugs and the drugs to handle the rare diseases. Usually, the trials go on for a few months or a year or two. If during the consent for trial, we can mandate them that they have to continue supplying the orphan drugs, if the trial is successful, of course, to the concerned volunteers until the time the drug is commercialized. At least the patients who have been cured or have got improvements, they could continue getting these drugs until they can commercially have a hand over it. So if some kind of an arrangement or something kind of a contract can be made with the innovators to continue supplying those drugs to Indian volunteers, that could probably help them. Also, sir, many a times it is seen that after the drugs are approved, it takes some time for those companies to come and launch in India. So if we can have some kind of an agreement with them that they have to enter the Indian market after a successful trial, once it is commercialized anywhere in the world, if they have to enter India within a reasonable time, or else the government would consider the path of compulsory licensing to Indian companies, probably we could see more of orphan drugs and these drugs coming to India and being available to the Indian patients of rare diseases. As far as industry is concerned, what looks from Professor Ramaiah's presentation is that we need to introspect and understand how we can play a role, how we can bring these drugs into India, how we can even do some researches. We can start doing some small research in repurposing of drugs as somebody suggested, and play an important role, because this looks like developing into a big market for future. 8 out of 10 drugs, the 8 out of 10 ailments, the rare diseases, as I understand, are somewhere traced to genetics. And in modern age, genomics is becoming very important. India, apart from having a very strong pharmaceutical industry, we also have a very strong IT industry where we have experts in artificial intelligence, in data sciences. If the pharmaceutical companies can work with these people with these kind of skills, a lot of open sources data are available, anonymous data of people with rare diseases are available globally. We can use data sciences to identify some drugs that could probably be future candidates. That also is possible to work from our side, from India. In the end, I would only say that we need to do much more than creating awareness. And I assure you, from the Indian pharmaceutical industry, at least from the IDMA, Dr. Ramaiah, that we will start looking at the rare diseases and orphan drugs more seriously than we were doing till yesterday. Thank you once again for having me here. Thanks.
Thank you, Viranchi bhai. A very constructive suggestion you have given with regard to clinical trial, and this needs to have a direct and special attention of Dr. V.G. Somani ji. When he comes, I think he must have noted down this varied point. Now I come to Mr. K.G. Anand Krishnan. Mr. K.G. Anand Krishnan is the Director General in OPPI, which represents, research-based companies in India. His rich and diverse experience give him recognition in the entire industry. Mr. Anand Krishnan is also known as Mr. KG. He he helps startups and on the advisory panel also, and several institutions he is representing, and he is on the board member of many bodies also. Prior to joining OPPI, Mr. Anand Krishnan was Vice President and Managing Director of South Asia Region MSD India. He has been associated with Pfizer India, Pharmacia, and Novartis India. His specialization is marketing, training, strategy, and new product planning and logistics. humble, a very ever smiling. Over to Mr. KG Anand Krishnan.
Thank you, Mr. Sikri, for inviting me for today's meeting. Honorable Chief Guest, Dr. Somani, distinguished panelist, Professor Ramaiah, and others, a very good morning and good afternoon to every one of you. I think it's a very interesting subject that we have chosen for the discussion today. And what I would like to do is that keep the entire conversation centered around the patient. And let's take from the policy, the draft policy that has come in early 2020. And if this policy can be really, finalized, I think it can have a significant impact on the patients and their treatment. And there are 7 areas that I would like to really focus and emphasize upon, and which has been touched by some of my previous speakers. One is clarity on the definition of. The second is early diagnosis of rare. Third is adequate and sustainable funding. Sustainable to be underlined. Increased R&D and awareness of rare disease. Learning from global best practices. Investing in multi-stakeholder partnership, and then how companies can contribute, towards addressing this big challenge of rare disease. So these are the 7 aspects where I'll try to very briefly touch upon. Today, because of ambiguity on the definition, I think it is falling between the cracks. If we can, at least the CDSCO has now defined an Orphan Drugs Act. If we can at least align rare disease to this Orphan Drug Act, I think it will become a much better step. Things will get harmonized right from a R&D perspective, as well as it will bring in consistency across all the government departments. Today, because of lack of a proper definition, it is being interpreted differently by different ministries and different, groups. The second part is early diagnosis of rare disease. It is so important that we focus on this. It is important that government, both at the center and at the state level, set up diagnostic and treatment centers in all the states. This can be done, now that the government, as somebody mentioned earlier, with so much of focus coming on COVID, this is the time for us to really ensure that we are able to get these centers of excellence both at the state and the center level, so that diagnosis of this disease is at a much earlier stage. Speedy diagnosis through mandatory screening, diagnostic capabilities, and access to specialist healthcare is something that we must work on. And I would also like to add here, early diagnosis and intervention can provide life-saving benefits, improve the quality of life to the patients. And I think it will also reduce the stress. It was heartbreaking when some talked about, how the patients are really suffering in this. Professor Ramaiah alluded to this. Sudershan mentioned about it. It can be done if we try and have an early diagnosis of these diseases. Then I want to touch upon adequate and sustainable funding. It is important, that we have a central government funding, at least a budget allocation of about 500 crores in year 1. It's not big, because many a time what happens is state does not spend all the money and it is returned to the center. I think this we have experienced year on year. Why not we try and pool some funding for rare diseases, which can be very, very useful. The second is that today, group 1 diseases is being allocated 15 lakhs. I think that remit must be much more bigger. It is not possible to treat some of the diseases with just with a 15 lakh funding. It may have to be slightly better and improved. For group 2 and 3 diseases, it is important that we have very clear provisions of including them, and also important to ensure that we are having a sustainable funding, and it cannot be just only a one-time funding for some of these diseases. What will happen is that if we have a good funding, this will allow increased access to treatment. Policy will enable and support, the treatment. And as chronic diseases need chronic funding. Provision for funding for new promising therapeutic options must also be included in this. I think some of my friends also mentioned about CSR. I think it's very important that we do this. And also, is there a way there can be a joint funding, 60% coming from center, 40% from state, so that it is not just only one part of the government. It can be a joint funding that can be there, which can help. The other part that we would also like to emphasize upon is that the cost of treatment can also be brought down if complete exemption is given from duties and taxes on all the drugs that are coming specifically for rare diseases, because today they are being charged anywhere from 5 to 12% in terms of duties and taxes. Can we try and look at completely exempting them? Then increasing R&D and awareness. It is so important, that we bring in a much greater degree of awareness, and this is where government should provide a dedicated budget for research, communication, and awareness of the rare disease. One classic example, just take a look. Today in our country, does anyone not know about COVID? COVID was an unheard part. So if the government decides to bring in an awareness, decides to bring in a significant change on addressing some of the diseases, it can be done. And the fundamental part is really how do we try and bring in this awareness and make it known across the public, and then support it with, communication, diagnosis, and treatment. And of course, ICMR has started this registry, which is a brilliant initiative. It is important that we make this as an active and live registry. Just setting up the registry is one part, but it is important that we make this registry a live registry, because that is what is going to give us data to understand what is the prevalence of the disease, what is the incidence, and how do we address them in a comprehensive manner. And then we move on to multi-stakeholder partnership, because diseases of this nature cannot be addressed in a siloed manner. We need this to be addressed, in a multiple, collaborative manner, like state government, central government, patient bodies, general public, families, doctors, NGOs, the pharma industry, the diagnostic setups. If we all come together and start thinking about how do we try and help, these patients, the numbers are small relative to other diseases. We can do it provided we come together as a multi-stakeholder partnership. There are a lot of global developments on rare disease. Can we learn something from some of these, experiences that are there from the global best practices? For example, there is a rare disease reference network that is available. Can we try and establish something of that? Can we become a part of it? Can we learn from this experience and also bring it to India? Or can we subsidize access to medicine? Can we fund research? Because there are some very interesting models, and I remember Professor Ramaiah alluded to some of them. Can we look at them, and instead of reinventing the wheel, can we replicate some of them in our country? Because that will take us one step ahead. Our companies are doing a lot of work, and particularly I would like to talk about OPPI member companies. They are doing a lot of patient-driven, work today here. Our companies are committed to increase their support for collaboration with the government for the rare disease, bringing in global research and therapies to India. We want to bring in genetic therapy into India, and we are committed to offering cutting-edge treatment in India through enhancing healthcare capacity at the state and at the central level, offering charitable access program. Like, for example, some of our member companies like Sanofi Genzyme, Takeda, Roche, as well as Pfizer, I'm just naming a few. There are very clear patient assistance programs that are being provided in addition to several diagnostics and other support that are being provided. We can work on this. The key takeaways, again, I think very clearly we need to ensure that this policy becomes a reality. It cannot remain a draft always. It has to become a conclusive policy. There must be universal mandatory screening, build diagnostic capability and capacity, increase access to treatment at both state and the central level, ensure ICMR registry becomes a functional registry, encourage research for rare diseases and also for diagnosis. And as I said, finally, a multi-stakeholder partnership between industry, academia, government, and also the patient bodies can make a significant impact. I think these patients deserve all the attention that we need to provide. Thank you so much. Thanks for giving this opportunity.
Thank you, Anand Krishnan ji. Very nice and constructive suggestion you have given, that if the draft policy 2020 is taken seriously, many problems can be resolved. Focus can be on definition, sustainable funding. A very good suggestion you have given. Every state at the end of the year is not able to exhaust their budget allocation, and that money just goes waste. So even a 500 crore worth of budget can be allotted for this type of pious and social project, it will be really good. And finally, what you suggested is investing in multi-stakeholder partnership and increase in the R&D expenses. Thanks a lot. Now, as far as panelists is there, this program is over. Now, we would like to have blessings of two gentlemen. First is Mr. V. Krishna Reddy. He is the National President of Bulk Drug Manufacturer Association since last 3 years, a chemical engineer by qualification. He is the Managing Director of Sri Krishna Pharmaceuticals. They are renowned bulk drug manufacturing company. They are the leader of paracetamol. As a business leader with valuable insight into the core issue of the industry, he has been instrumental in pursuing with the government on behalf of Vice-President, on behalf of BDMA. He has been able to help the industry to resolve many issues at central level as well as state level. He is the son of Mr. V. Reddy, my old friend, who is the founder of BDMA, Bulk Drug Manufacturer Association. So I will call him SW. SW means silent worker. So he worked with the silence. So over to Mr. Krishna Reddy. Just try to, because Dr. Somani also has got another commitment. So we have to have, कहते किसी का मान और सम्मान करने के लिए नेशनल प्रेसिडेंट का बोलना बहुत जरूरी है. So similarly, after you, Mahesh Doshi also will be taking a few minutes. Over to Mr. Krishna Reddy.
Thank you, Mr. Sikri, for the brief introduction that you have given. Before I proceed further, I would just like to, because after the brief introduction by Dr. Ramaiah on the rare diseases, it was an eye-opener for many of us, because we have only heard the term rare diseases and orphan drugs, but actually did not know to what effect it was affecting people throughout the world. His brief presentation on the status of the disease and in terms of the number of people and the percentages, it was very well defined. He also mentioned that he was expecting BDMA to talk on the subject of the availability of generic orphan drugs in India. In this regard, I just wanted to mention that rare diseases have been defined by various governments in various ways. The US says that it should be less than 200,000. In Europe, the definition is 1 in 2,000, and different countries have different ratios for defining rare diseases. As an orphan drug, in various countries, in the advanced countries, they have been given exclusivity to market these drugs. In US, for example, there is an exclusivity of 7 years. The same there is an exclusivity of 10 years for in Europe and Japan. And then it became very attractive for corporates. The leading corporates serving rare diseases are Roche, Novartis, BMS, Takeda, Sanofi, Pfizer, Amgen, Bayer, etc. Today, in India, one of the reasons why it has not been promoted very widely was that there was no definite policy on the availability for the manufacture of these drugs. One is that many pharma companies would not be interested because the number of patients for rare disease is very slow, very small, and therefore the volume also is very less. In order to entice the pharmaceutical companies to manufacture these drugs, we need a lot of incentives. Also, India does not have a orphan drugs law, but the draft released by the Health Ministry on regulatory payment for clinical trials in India define orphan drugs as those intended to treat a condition which affects fewer than 2,000. This was released by ICMR, but at the same time, for CDSO, the target is about 5 lakh. India has also started revising its orphan drug policy in order to benefit patients with rare diseases. Provisions were made for clinical development for rare diseases in the New Drug and Clinical Trial Rules 2019. Some of them are fast track approval process and special status for orphan drugs, including a complete fee waiver for filing clinical trials, provision for expeditious review process even if the drug has not completed all clinical trial phases. The sponsor or applicant may apply to this central licensing authority for expedited review. Waiver of local clinical study and phase 4 on the satisfaction of central licensing authority. The financial benefits are no application fees charged for conducting clinical trials for the orphan drugs. Apart from these, if much more incentives are offered to the pharmaceutical industry, I think many industries would come forward for the production of these drugs. So that's my take on it. Thank you, Mr. Sikri. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Krishna Reddy. Really grateful. In a very short 3 minutes deliberation, you have given a lot of indication. Now I come to Mr. Mahesh Doshi. Mahesh Doshi is the promoter of 2 units in Maharashtra and Gujarat. He is API exporter. He is managing director of Avesta Pharma, which is US FDA approved plant. He is associated with Premium Pharma Association, IDMA, Indian Drug Manufacturer Association, for more than 3 decades. I don't know what is his age, in various capacities. And as on date, he heads IDMA as the national president. He was the first senior vice president of IDMA. He is also founder of COA member of Pharmaxil and has been actively participating in all the initiative and activities of the industry with the government. A man samarpit to the industry, a friend of everyone who believes in Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas. Over to Mahesh Bhai.
Thank you very much. A friend, philosopher and guide, and very articulate regulator, our DCGI, Dr. VG Somani ji, Sri Sikri ji, Dr. Ramaiah Muthyala, President and CEO IORD, our friend Sudershan Jain, Sri KG Anand Krishnan ji, Sri VV Krishna Reddy Garu, founder, ex-chairman and a founder vice-chairman of the Pharmaxil, and director Suven Life Science, Venkat Jasti Garu, and my colleague Viranchi, Sr.Vice-President IDMA. My friends on the webinar, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the kind introduction and a warm welcome. It's given me a great pleasure to join you all at this webinar on need for essential medicine for rare diseases, hosted jointly by IORD, BDMA, IPA, IDMA, FOPE and OPPI. Since 1977, the WHO model list of essential medicine has provided advice to a member state to decide which pharmaceutical technology should be provided to a patient with their public health system. An incentive system has been put in place by various governments for the development of a medicine for rare diseases, often referred to as an orphan drug. India has taken the lead in focusing on R&D in this neglected area and is one of the top global funder of R&D in neglected diseases, with a promising scientific base built on the foundation of an expanding science and technology workforce. The country is well placed to make a substantial contribution to innovation in neglected tropical diseases. A third of a new drug, 6 out of 18, and 2/3 of a new vaccine, 6 of 10, for neglected diseases registered since 2000 have had Indian involvement. Nearly a 12% of a drug, diagnostic and vaccine candidate for a neglected diseases in the R&D pipeline are from India. The world's first leprosy vaccine was developed in India in 2016 and will accelerate addiction efforts. India has successfully eliminated certain infection diseases such as guinea worm, trachoma, and yawa in recent years. Yet neglected diseases such as leishmaniasis, filariasis, leprosy, snake bite, and soil-transmitted worm infection still pose challenges. A draft national policy for rare diseases has been released for a public comment by Ministry of Health and Family Welfare in February 2020. The policy provides for lowering the incidence of rare diseases based on an integrated preventive strategy encompassing awareness, generation, and screening program and enable access to affordable healthcare to a patient of rare diseases which are amenable to one-time treatment. The policy has noted that number of a persons suffering from a diseases considered rare globally is lacking in India and accordingly provide that for the purpose of the policy, the term rare diseases shall consider three groups of a disorder identified and categorized by an expert based on their clinical experiences. Considering the limited data available on a rare diseases and in the light of a competing health priority, the focus of the policy is on the prevention of rare diseases as a priority for all the three groups of rare diseases identified by experts. The policy includes the infection tropical diseases and identify a need to support research on a treatment for a rare diseases. It has not yet prioritized diseases an area for a research funding for how innovation would be supported. In India, all medicine are essential as a drug, as a category are included in the Essential Commodity Act. Moreover, the national list of essential medicine formed the basis for the DPCOs since 2013, and hence all drugs included there are a price control. Neglected diseases predominantly affect poor and marginalized population and do not constitute a market that is attractive enough to stimulate private sector investment. As such, the Indian government must step in with appropriate policy and investment to support innovation. The Department of Pharmaceutical proposed to amend DPCO 2013 to exempt orphan drug from purview of a DPCO 2013. This provision is intended to increase the improved accessibility, especially of a drug for treating orphan diseases. In the short term, affordability may be hit unless alternate medicine are put in place. However, accessibility and affordability would improve substantially in the long term. We have recommended that the amendment should be extended to the include rare and tropical diseases to encourage R&D and manufacture of a drug for such essential requirement. In this regard, we must note that pharmaceutical R&D is a very expensive and time-consuming as compared to other industrial research on account of a regulatory requirement of safety, efficacy, and quality. Sustained R&D effort by Indian company have enabled the government to address India's need on tropical country-specific diseases like TB, Kala Azar, dengue, and other life-threatening infections like cancer, asthma, diabetic, etc. India is the fourth largest government funder of neglected diseases research and the largest among the middle-income countries. Yet, funding falls far short of requirement. For public agency disburse R&D grant for neglected diseases in India. Hence, R&D activity expenses should be continue under a weighted deduction of 200% under the income tax law for at least another 10 years. It is time for India to notify the national policy for rare diseases to pave the way for greater funding and mechanism to support R&D innovation, creating an enabling environment for research and innovation will be crucial if India is to achieve the target set in Sustainable Development Goal 3.3 to end epidemic of neglected tropical diseases by 2030. And I'm apologize for not pronouncing a certain name of the diseases because even I have come across first time a name of these all diseases. And a suggestion by the Sikri ji, this 5-star activity, at least once in a year, we should continue. Sikri ji, from my association, I'm assuring you, we are always ready to participate. And as my colleague, Dr. Viranchi Shah has given the assurance to Dr. Ramaiah, from IDMA, we will give you all the type of full support when and where it's required. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mahesh Bhai. Focus should be prevention and need to support research and long-term and short-term, both the suggestion you have given. I have a submission to you that whatever you have spoken, can you circulate this note to particularly Professor Ramaiah and all the association because there are a lot of new ideas which you have suggested that can be deliberated among all the top association head. It will be very constructive and suggestive to give a common representation to the government. Thanks a lot.